Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast in your car or truck as you're driving along, or put in those earbuds as you're on public transport and sit back and take it all in. In this presentation, I'd like to talk about loyalty to nation from our politicians and senior public servants and leading figures. Loyalty to nation, I think, is important, but at the same time, we've got the globalists aggressively dismantling certainly all the Western polities anyway. Now, how many generations back do we need to go to ensure loyalty? Is it even possible to use this criteria to determine whether loyalty will exist or not? For example, look at Britain. Tony Blair and David Cameron are long-term British, British-born, with going back many generations. Yet they eagerly and aggressively sold Britain out to the globalists. And we could go back even further. John Major was particularly during the latter part of his premiership, that the globalist thing really, started to kick off in a big way. Blair really turbocharged it, but the beginnings of that were all set by the John Major. So again, he's goes back generations of English born. So why is being local born even an issue? Let's look at some other alternatives here. For example, in Australia's had a number of prime ministers that were very aggressively nationalistic for Australia and wanting to do good for the country and the Australian population, and they were overseas born even. So that's something to consider. Look at, say, in the case of the people that were prominent in the American Revolution, people like, say, Alexander Hamilton, who were there at that stage in the colonies of Britain in North America. And Alexander Hamilton was a fierce advocate for America, or the nation as it subsequently became, and other people that were born in the UK or born in Britain that came to America similarly were staunch advocates for American independence and the American the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all that sort of stuff. So and there were there've been plenty of people coming to the United States from places, whether the United Kingdom or elsewhere, that were again very active and very staunch advocates of America and the American society and the American nation. So it's not impossible to have people that were born overseas to still have loyalties in their new adopted nation. Now, I'm not sure whether people being born in the country or not is an issue, but or in itself is an issue. But I come back to Indians as an example. The Indians who say came to Fiji, and I'll use that as just one example. Now they're 5, 6, 7 generations on in Fiji. Yet they exist as a society within the society. They want their own politicians. They want their own Indian everything. They still send back to the home country in India for brides and husbands. They're very tight as a community, and they perceive themselves as Indian. The idea that they'd be Fijian would be laughable. And I've known people who I knew a lady who's, I think, 5th generation Fijian born. And when I suggested she was Fijian, she laughed and you must be insane. I'm Indian. So she ended up. Now she's an interesting case actually, because she's an Indian, came from Fiji, emigrated to Australia, and dated a lot of white Australian guys. So and was she's quite good looking, and used to dress in very sexy outfits, and she had she had great legs and everything, and she dated a lot of white guys. When it came to marrying, it was a husband brought from India. So So it just shows how thick they are. And I've known Indian guys, or even people from Sri Lanka, for goodness sakes, who've come to Australia as migrants, or even their parents came, and they still end up marrying people from their homeland or their village in India or the subcontinent. So there's very little integration and no attempt at it. They want it, and they still perceive themselves. So when you get a society like that, that perceive themselves as a society within a society and a very self-contained one, then you really have to sort of look at, well, do you want people like that in government? Probably not. Does that mean they sell out the country any more aggressively or less aggressively than a David Cameron or a Tony Blair would in the United Kingdom, for example, or as aggressively that they'd sell the country out as, say, an Obama did or a Bill Clinton did? So we need to look at ideology, international sort of concepts of business, trade, money movement, these sorts of things, because that sort of superimposes itself on any considerations. Now, an American, to be president of the United States, you have to be born in the United States. I don't think that means anything anymore. It's not enough. So the issue comes down to, how do we, on what basis do we select candidates for public office, or indeed for senior public service appointments? They really have to I think, they have to be fully committed to, the country, the nation, its people, its heritage, and all that sort of thing. Now, in some countries, you have to take an oath to that effect. That, if you look at, say, the oath of the president of the United States, I will faithfully serve the office, and then you look at the behaviour of someone like a Joe Biden or a Barack Obama, for that matter, and they, in my opinion, flagrantly abused that oath, as indeed have many other public officials, whether they be judges or anything like that. So we have to assume that the oath has no meaning to these people, and they have every intention of doing almost the exact opposite of what they've sworn to uphold in terms of the oath or their commitment, or even their job description, for goodness sakes. So we need to if you go into private business, you get hired and the job description says that you have to do A, B, and C, and you do the exact opposite, you'll last 5 minutes. You'll be out of a job real quick. Why aren't we doing the same for public servants and political figures? So this is something that really needs to be thought through. The more controls you put on it, the more it can be politicized, and the more it can be gamed for advantage by this or that group. But unless people are fully prepared to commit to, this is public office holders or politicians, fully commit to the local people and the nation, and unless they're prepared to make those commitments and mean them, and that they're somehow going to be measured on them, not just from the ballot box, but generally, then why would you want them in there? Now, the globalists may want them in there because, hey, we want people who are going to sell out the local populace, for goodness sakes. Now, another thing that sort of is interesting is that the class divide is not the issue it was. For example, the Labor Party has very successfully recruited a lot of people, particularly women, from very working class environments, and they are falling over themselves to sell out their fellow citizens and to sell the country out to the globalists on the basis there's some sort of Marxist nirvana just around the corner full of black lesbians and so on. Now, they're picking low IQ people to be enablers here and to be stooges and just to stuff shirts and so on that they need. But the idea that a working class person would be so keen and eager to sell out their fellow working class citizens and neighbours and so on has staggered me. I wouldn't have thought that would have been possible. But there you go. And there's not just one or two. There's huge numbers of them prepared to do it. Now, we're talking working class people who would, the best they'd have would be a part-time barista job somewhere, and now they're being paid 3 or 4 times the average wage, and they're got prestigious positions with nice offices and people calling them minister or sir or Mr. Secretary or something like that. So it's all very, Mr. Senator. It's all very prestigious, and so they sold out their fellow citizens on the basis that they've got a nice little golden ticket to play around with. But nonetheless, the idea of it wasn't difficult to find people who wanted to represent their constituents and their nation and their people and their society and its history and culture and so on. It wasn't hard. It's only been difficult since the globalists started to take over the political machinery and infiltrate it. And since then, it's been difficult. So by going back to a situation where the local member of parliament is a local member of parliament, has grown up in that area, is known by those people, not parachuted in by head office or something like that, but actually is a representative of the people, then we can go back to a sort of honesty in politics, representative politics that has been lost. As long as the party machine is deciding who gets to stand for election, then they've been infiltrated by the globalists. They can control it, so they can pervert and subvert the entire political process just by who they choose and where they put them. And so the globalists only had to really infiltrate the party machinery, and then they subsequently had, and gradually the people that were concerned about their citizens and their country, they were gradually replaced or bribed or corrupted or subverted in some way, but nonetheless. So if you look at, say, British Parliament now, you'd struggle to get 10 out of 600 plus, 650, whatever it is, members of Parliament there. You'd struggle to get even 10 that you'd consider to put Britain first. The rest are all globalist flunkies or stooges, hangers-on, passengers, whatever, but they're there representing the interests of the globalists. That's how successful the globalists have been. And it's not dissimilar in Australia or other Germany. I mean, the list goes on of places where the globalist machine or the globalists have penetrated the party machines and have taken over, as they've penetrated NGOs and all sorts of things like that. So what do we do? How many generations do you go back? I don't think it's an issue of that anymore. I don't think it's a case of you've got someone that's, say, been born for 10 generations in Britain that they're going to automatically be staunch loyalists to Britain, the nation and its people. I don't think that counts anymore. Again, coming back to Tony Blair and David Cameron and others that were more than willing to sell Britain out to the globalists. It's something more than that. In order to return to representative democracy, we have to, that is the only way I think we can overcome this representative democracy. Local people who grew up, born in the area, grew up in the area, and they are committed to the British people, not party machined into place through NGO radicalisation and so on, which is currently the situation. But let me know your thoughts on how should politicians and senior public servants be selected? Because at the moment, they're only going, those jobs are only going to people who hate the West and are eager to sell it out. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.